16, and I hope you're all keeping well. My website is thomassheridanarts.com. If you want to help me out, you can buy a book there. All the links to the blogs and everything else are from that point on. You can also go to my Thomas Sheridan YouTube arts channel, and you can subscribe there and share the videos and whatever, and find some interesting information. Now, tonight's show, it's really about, I guess, failure to achieve what we are told we can achieve when we're growing up. In some ways, it's like the law of attraction idea in reverse, that we reject all our desires and we reject everything that makes us happy and convince ourselves we're not going to get them, and then they manifest. Of course, it doesn't work as simply as that, because that would be just as nuts as the idea of like making a vision board and visualizing and it arriving for you. Now, there's so true to that, but you have to work for it. You know, you're not going to sit there at home and say, I want to make $1 million or £1 million or €1 million by thinking about it. But if you started a business or had an idea or wrote a song or just work 5 or 6 jobs and you manage to get a really high paying one, then you might get your million. And that's how it really works. It doesn't happen just by manifesting it or thinking about it. That's all bollocks. I was just thinking today about Brian Cox and Richard Dawkins and people like that who, you know, are kind of extreme atheists who see that the human condition, we're nothing but like DNA. We're nothing but like DNA robots. That's all we are. Do they cry if their children die? I mean, with Brian Cox, now I wouldn't wish this on the guy and his wife or anything. I'm not saying that. This is purely a philosophical idea I'm sticking out there. But if Brian Cox has had a child and the child died, well, if there's no such thing as a spiritual connection, then if he's to really carry his philosophy to the most honest level, it's simply just an unfortunate loss of DNA material that can be replaced by another fertile woman. That's really the end game of this kind of materialist, reductionist, you know, humanist idea. I mean, even they have to draw a line in the sand and say no more. You know, we can go on very, very intense philosophical ideas, but ultimately, if someone is a hardcore atheist, believes there's no such thing as a human spirit or soul as such, and that everything inside your head can be reduced down to consciousness in terms of being just neurochemical electrical signals in the brain, then if they have a child, A, why do they have an emotional bond with that child? And secondly, well, they would say it's because it's their DNA and we have to protect it. Now, that's pretty fucked up when you think about it. And B, if that child dies and passes away, then what's the point? Why mourn it? If you're a young guy and you have a young wife, like Brian Cox does, and the child dies, well, just get another one. It was a loss of DNA. It was an unfortunate financial investment in a pile of DNA, and it didn't work out, and we just get another one. It was almost like a business that failed. Of course, I'm not saying that Brian Cox and his family would ever think like that. Of course they wouldn't. I'm sure they're not like that at all. I'm sure they're decent people. But if you're going to go with an idea, then go the whole fucking way. Go the whole way. Completely. And then let's take it to another level. Suppose when Richard Dawkins dies, what's the point in having a funeral? What's the point of anything like that? Let's just chop him up as meat and feed him to the tigers in the zoo. Just chop his corpse up as meat and feed him to the tigers in the zoo. Because he's just meat. He's just meat. You're just meat. I'm just meat. This is what they tell us. This is what the ideas that they put out there. And then they put it out there that, like, I'm so clever. I'm a reductionist, humanist, materialist, rationalist. You have no consciousness other than neurochemical brain chemicals, and you have no soul at all. No, you're just DNA, just a bag of DNA. And then if I was to suggest, okay, so when your mother, child, family, or friends, or people you love are dead, it's just a loss of DNA. Why bother mourning? They won't go there. They will not go to that level. ever. And that's the theme of tonight's show. The demarcation lines of human culture and behavior where someone says, no more. I can't go past that point. Because to go past that point would reveal the honesty, the absolute purity of their intent. Because the next level after that is murdering and killing people who are not as smart as Brian Cox or Richard Dawkins, or these fucking materialistic guys who sit there, skeptical debunkerlies. You know the types. They sit there all day going, "You're a retard. There is nothing like this. You're a retard," and all this crap, right? And they with their piles of Xanax before they walk in front of the train because they're so rationalist. There's a group actually I've discovered on Facebook that claims to be against Abrahamic thought, and it's very interesting. I was appealed. It was like an anti-Abrahamic Facebook page, and I joined kind of expecting it to be good, and I noticed very quickly early on it was just only concerned with attacking Christians and Jews. No, sorry, Christians and Muslims. It was not. It would not have. There was nothing about anything like that. So I suspected they were Bernie Sanders type liberals who are again. You know, they're reasoned, they're rationalists, they're atheists and all this, but they would not criticize the origin religion of Abrahamic religion because for fear they'd be seen as anti-fucking Semitic. This is the demarcation line I'm talking about. So just as a test on this Facebook page, I made a post about circumcision. I made a post about male circumcision. The second there was no thumbs up on it, one came underneath saying, well, it's clearly a hygienic reason. But I said, that's not why rabbis chop the tops off dicks of young boys. And then I was called an anti-Semite and blocked from the group. You can get into these people very quickly. They're dishonest. They're dishonest because they're just piles of encapsulated ego and nothing else. They're liars and they're deceivers. I'm not one to push Infowars and Alex Jones and all that, but he put an interesting article this week. I don't think it was him that produced it, of a guy standing in America holding a Trump sign, and he was attacked. And when I say attacked, I mean he was physically attacked by these bleeding heart liberals who are voting for Bernie Sanders for no other reason than he held up a Trump sign. And that's the madness of it all. And this is the introduction tonight to tonight's show, the meat golem. The meat golem. And I will talk about that after I talk a few other things. But bear that term in mind. I didn't invent it. I don't think. I'm sure someone else come up with it. It's too obvious. But I'll talk about this a little later. After one, the meat golem. I've also uploaded the second audio book. I've done the Children of Lear, a reading of that. I put some sound effects and stuff into them to try and make it a bit more interesting than the regular audio books you would pay for, just to entertain people, but also to put in a little bit of extra, shall we say, literature into this alternative scene, to try and get people to explore the horizons beyond what they've been conditioned to believe by alternative media, and to get out there and try to expand their horizons both intellectually and culturally. Nothing wrong with that. It's always good for the soul. The first book, The Last Demon, is there already by Isaac Bashevis Singer, and then we have The Children of Lear, and I've got lots more I'm going to upload, lots of surprises as well. And it'll be basically books that I like, and they're mostly short stories, but I will read from other factual books, subjects that interest me and topics that interest me, and hopefully it'll become a nice little archive that people can just refer to and enjoy, including a couple of Lovecraft stories, which I've always wanted to make audiobooks of. Speaking of Lovecraft, I've been just thinking an awful lot about him and what he was about. It's hard to get inside the man's head. He was definitely an eccentric individual, and he perfectly wrote down in absolute, clarity, magic and rituals and horrors and aspects of the supernatural, and then went on to say, oh, it's all nonsense. A recent manuscript of a book called The Cancer of Superstition that he was writing with Harry Houdini before Harry Houdini died has recently come to light. And again, the two of them are coming together to say that anything to do with the supernatural or magic or the mystical or the occult, it's all nonsense and none of it is real. Now, Harry Houdini is an interesting character too. He was definitely into exposing fraudulent mediums, but I think that Houdini, and I believe that Lovecraft was the same, was they were getting the garbage out of the way, just like people like myself and others. Yes, there is truth to things like the law of attraction, although I hate to use that term, and there is truth to things like the power of intentions, but there's so much new age muck out there, which is kind of like the postmodernist superstition that we have to deal with, that the real stuff, the real spiritual truths, the real magical power that we all have within inside us is lost in that mud. The black mud of superstition, as Carl Jung also called it, not Carl Jung, is Sigmund Freud called it. I'm more from the Jungian end of things. Yes, I do accept that there is a magical and a mystical reality, but it's very difficult to get to the heart of it. Now, what makes H.P. Lovecraft so strange and so odd is that many of his books are written in such phenomenal detail concerning even things like the topography of landscapes and how mystical cities built by the old great ones in the Antarctica or under the sea looked. That's because Lovecraft himself used to have the most incredible dreams. He had the most vivid, colorful, expansive, enormous, and interesting and mystical dreams. And that was almost the catalyst for why he rejected anything to do with magic and supernatural as being garbage, because he was probably afraid of those aspects within himself. In fact, one friend took him on a walk in a cemetery late at night, and the friend said that he was absolutely terrified. Now, why would someone who rejects the supernatural, the mystical, the occult, and all that kind of thing, the Fortean ideas, why would he be terrified in a cemetery at night? It would just be dead meat in the ground, just like what I was saying about Brian Cox and Dawkins earlier on. That's how they see humanity. So shouldn't have Lovecraft had no fear at night that these things don't exist? It was the fear of his own confrontation with these supernatural ideas that probably was the reason why he came out as such a rational skeptic debunker during his time. And I believe a lot of the modern ones have had these mystical experiences, and they do not want to admit them to themselves, because that then puts them outside the parameters of something they can control. You know what I mean? They can control a rational world where there's no mystery, no occultism, and in true word, no hidden, no anything like that. But once they step outside those parameters, past that demarcation line, you hear me talk about the Terminator, the idea of being inside the dance within the Terminator. They're okay with day, they're okay with night. But anyone can tell you that has a kind of shall we say, a transcendental way of thinking, that the dawn and the dusk are when I feel the most alive. I feel like I think it's the long shadows cast by the sun low in the sky. Same thing again at autumn. One of the reasons I think people feel so relaxed in autumn time is due to the fact of the low height of the sun in the sky, more so than the leaves turning colour. It casts long shadows and natural forms on the landscape, and even people's faces. They take on an extra dimensionality because they're brought. The shadows create the structures that actually bring a sense of form to them. It's almost like the low sun in the sky makes the world more real, and that's why I always feel that I feel so much better while I'm in the Terminator. My soul dances inside the Terminator, and it's a wonderful feeling right in the middle. And here was Lovecraft having all these dreams and all these these visions and all these writing this incredible Cthulhu mythos it's just unbelievable. It's just I totally get the people who say they believe the Necronomicon must be real, and they believe that there's something to Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. There has to be something to it, because it's so real, and it's all derived from the dreams in his head. It came from a supernatural place. Sleep and dreaming is still, you've seen my videos on sleep and dreaming, it's still a supernatural experience. It's still not, no one understands how it really works. And that's where his ideas came from. And you see so much of this. You see this idea of the Cthulhu rising from the bottom of the ocean, and his remanifestation upon the planet is the causation is consciousness tearing itself to pieces on the inside, ripping apart from the inside out, madness, insanity, just melting into a world of pure cognitive corruption and consciousness breakdown. That is just too realistic to have just been a product of a rather dullard person, to be honest. When you look at Lovecraft, he was like almost Aspergerish. He had that's I know that's common in a lot of artistic people, but his mind was almost like a conduit. Maybe the fact that he wasn't a believer in the supernatural, that he tapped into the real source. You know what I'm saying? Because he didn't believe he got the proper transmission, where someone who would be a believer would put their own prejudiced version upon anything that they would envision, like the Bernie Sanders, the bird landing on the podium. Well, that means he's some kind of Christ-like redeemer to people. That's putting their own mythos upon an event as it happens. But if you don't believe in any of that, and you have these incredible dreaming visions, and you put that down to prose and writing and short stories, maybe that's as close to source as you can possibly get. And you look at the world today, there's three forms of people, right? From what I can tell, there's three classes of people. There's the meat golems, which I'll talk about in a while. And they're the ones who stand outside the iPhone place and wait for the latest iPhone. And not necessarily me, but like a lot of us look at them and go, what mindless sheeple. But when you have people calling them sheeple, what they are really saying is, how come they're happy with the bullshit and I'm not? Because they are content. That's what they want. The majority of the people on this planet are the meat golems, who are very happy queuing for the latest iPhones, watching the X Factor, all that kind of thing. The mainstream stuff, being obsessed with sports teams on TV. That's the world. Voting for politicians because they think they're Christ-like individuals, or they'll save them, or he'll get the working man a break. I trust him. I always remember years ago when I lived in America, Peter Jennings, the news anchor, I think it was on ABC, ABC. And they used to have this thing before the news started. More Americans trust Peter Jennings than any other newscaster. He's the most trusted anchor man in America. Now, this is just a cunt who reads a teleprompter. We're not getting any real insight from the man. He was just paid. He's dead now. He was just paid to read a teleprompter. And yet people would say, I trust him because I've been told to trust him. And that's what it's like. That's what it's like. There was a toy in the 80s called My Couch Potato, I think he was called, or My Buddy. Maybe there's two of them. I don't remember. But they were advertisements on the TV that this was your couch buddy, and he was like a kind of a trolley looking demon-y doll with a suit on him, and you put him beside you while you ate chips watching the ball game. And I was at work one day talking to these guys that I worked with. They were nice guys and everything. and they'd mentioned that they'd seen this thing, and I was saying, why would you want that? And one of them said, well, because the TV commercial says that you should have it on the couch beside you, and that's a meat golem, and he was a nice man, and they're happy with that. So those ones are going, they're just crazy, stupid sheeple. They forget one fundamental factor in all this, that the sheeple meat golems are happy. That's what they want. And they try to change them. They try to wake up the people, wake up the sheep, oh, wake up, warning, warning. They got to wake up the sheep. It's not going to work. Wasting time. They're in paradise. They really are. And then you have people who are not meat golems and highly intelligent and ethical, and they've peered through the veil, but they're still in the system. They still think the system will provide them with salvation if they vote for Bernie Sanders, if they vote for Obama, if they just do as they think is the right thing, make the most moral judgment, that it will all work out in the end. If they vote for the Lisbon Treaty because that's best for Ireland, if they do what they're told, but they have apply a moral decency to it because they think it's the better option, well, they're like the ones who've been torn asunder when Cthulhu rises from the depths. They descend into absolute madness because there's only one result when you play the game and you're an intelligent, decent person and you try to play the game. It will tear you to fucking bits. It will rip you to pieces. That's why the sheeple are actually in a better position, because they're not trying to apply their intelligence and their wisdom into a system that will destroy them. So they're never led down the garden path, where the ones who, I gotta vote for this guy because he stands for human rights or equality or diversity. I think we want a better world to end violence and end war. We've got to end it all. They're ripped to absolute bits. Cognitively, they're ripped to pieces from the fucking inside out. First, their consciousness is demolished. They're self-gaslighting semi-automatons who tear themselves to pieces trying to be a good person within the system. And they're the most tragic cases of all. And there's people like me, and many of you listen to this show, who know the thing is fucked up, know the world is insane, it's run by nut jobs, but no, there's nothing we can really do about it, so we make the most of our lives. So we try to maybe highlight injustices in the world through our Facebook pages and whatever, through social media. But we don't have a fixity of attachment to the outcome. It's almost like you have a sardonic approach. Oh, I couldn't vote. It's very cynical. But let me tell you something. Cynicism is a healthy way to live, because cynicism is it's the hot butter knife that cuts through the slab of butter, the slab of butter bullshit. It glides through it. It sees purity of thought. Now, it doesn't mean you're happy because of it. It just means that you're seeing things with a clarity. And that's how I can only live. I can't live any other way. It doesn't make me better than the meat golems or the Cthulhu fodder. It doesn't make me a better person, a wiser, smarter person. It's just how I've chosen to live. It's just how it works for me. And I know all the letters and all the communications and meeting you people out there, that it's the best system that works for you. You're just being yourself, being the person you were meant to be. It's okay being an average Joe. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a great, shall we say, authenticity of esteem in doing that, because when you have these heroic delusions, that's when you think you can wake up the sheeple about the New World Order and all this. These are ego-based heroic delusions that will waste all this energy you need for yourself in your own life. It's one thing to read an article by John Pilger or something about corporate corruption or political corruption and sharing it on Facebook and then becoming obsessed with it. That's a very dangerous place to go. I always tell to people, if you put a kind of shall we say, a challenging post on Facebook, make sure the next thing is a joke. And make sure the next thing is trivial or a joke or a laugh. Do not let people think that you're sinking into neuroses, because they won't listen to you. But if you're healthy, if you can share, say, there's an amazing recent John Pilger article about World War III has started. Share that, but don't become obsessed. Don't argue with people over it. Then post your next post will be a joke or a funny meme or something. Keep yourself human. Be an ordinary Joe. There's nothing wrong with being an ordinary Joe if you're an authentic ordinary Joe. It's when you try to, shall we say, pretend you're something you're not in order to appease your friends, your peers, your family, that you become like the Cthulhu fodder and it tears you to pieces from the inside. Be authentic to yourself as best you can and make the most of a shit situation, and you'd be surprised how better your life will be. It's when you develop notions of perfection or delusions of heroicism where you can change the world somehow that you're guaranteed your own self-destruction. Another interesting aspect, say in Lovecraft's story, The Call of Cthulhu, it is, and this is another thing that makes me think, why is this guy, was this like this? Why was he not a Fortean? Another thing about that was, and he mentions that the people who become aware of the return, the call of Cthulhu, as it is, was artists and native people, or people grounded to the earth. He mentions, South Sea Islanders. He mentions people on the west coast of Ireland. He mentions those, not tribal communities necessarily, but communities and individuals who are outside respectable society. They were the first ones to hear the call of Cthulhu. Artists are I've been saying this for years, and Carl Jung has said this, there's something about a creative mind, an artist, and that doesn't necessarily mean a painter or anything. I'm talking about just a creative mind, but a genuinely creative mind, even a creative thinker, that they tap into the zeitgeist just before it breaks. Just before it breaks, they tap into it. They see, when I say see, I would say they more envision, I know that's how it feels for me, the end result at the beginning. Not meaning that they have it all analyzed, but they have a sensation that this is not going to go anywhere good. There's no hope here. Let's not get involved or warn people not to stick their hopes in it. Artists are very, 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 very good at that. They can see the future, and that's why Lovecraft picked the young man in the artist community, and also in some of his other stories, you have an artist who's aware of a church and across the way, and there's something not right about that church spire. And of all the churches in Providence, that's the one that makes him go, that makes him want to see it. Even like the other stories you'll have where you'll have a young man who's just traveling around New England and hears about a town that's not even really mentioned. And before he goes to the town, what really becomes the catalyst is seeing a piece of artwork in the local library, a piece of jewelry that makes him want to go there. The artist mind, the artist exploration, it sees beyond that. And I don't know, we're Bohemian Plus, I don't know what you'd call us, as a term I was using for a while. Now, I'm not putting these ideas out there that we're better. This idea what cults do have, that like, if you join a cult and do what the psychopathic cult leader tells you, you'll be a better soul. You'll be more equipped to survive the comets when they come. You'll be selected to go on the spaceship. It's not the same thing as that. It's purely a neutral observation. When I see meat golems, like, standing outside the Apple store and being clapped by the Apple staff as they walk in and walk out, strutting out, I might add, with the latest iPhone in their hand, I'm not disgusted at them. I just laugh. I think it's funny. It's just like, oh my God, I can't believe that someone would live like that. And then when I'm not looking down on them, I'm just saying I just find it amusing. Not that they're stupid. or they're easily led, but I'm amused by the whole reality of confronting the situation. And then when we have the Cthulhu fodder, the ones who have really good thinking, my attitude is it's just too fucking bad. I mean, I've met people all my life, they're together, they're there. For one reason or other, they've been sucked into the system and believing that the system is the only hope. And instead of saying, you fucking idiot, what did you do that for? Or you're, look, it shows the losing team. My attitude is, too bad. Too bad. You could probably be better on our side. We could probably make your life happy. If you threw away the delusions of voting and working in the system, you'd probably be happier. But you can't do that. It's not my business or anyone else's business to tell another human being how to live their life. We're not dictators. We can only offer up our own personal philosophies, which could be absolute bollocks as well. And that's part of the idea of what I like to be, is that I'm perfectly happy with the idea that everything I believe in is a pile of shite. It could be exposed that way. I'm not bothered at all. I have no fixed attachment to it. And that suits me, because it's the journey. I've been telling you this from day one. The journey is far more is what you're on, not the destination. You're not aiming for the destination. You're enjoying the journey. And if you say, I see a future, the time is coming when the human race will get off its knees and we'll overthrow the psychopaths at the top. But when you envision that way of thinking, what you're doing is you're seeing a destination that will never come. It's like the people waiting in the cults, waiting for the comets to arrive, or the spaceship, the mothership. It's never going to come. And while you're aiming for this date, this end date, what's really happening is you're not living now. And life is fucking short. Life is those of you who think in your 20s and 30s now, let me tell you, I was you not too long ago. Life is short. And if I could go back to myself back then, I would have said to myself, you should have started writing books earlier. You should have put all your effort into art and creativity. You should have did this, that, and the other earlier on. You should have got out there and spoke about your own feelings like I'm doing now. When I was in my 20s, when I still believe the same things I believe now. Now, I got there in the end. But when you have a date, a fixed timeline, you're not living in the moment. You have to embrace every second of your life, and you have to be in that moment, because that's what you're here for. That's what you're here for. Now, that's not to put down people who're working towards a pension so they can take care of their kids or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you're waiting for a moment of salvation in the future, it never really comes in the way you wanted it. And then when it comes, you go, that wasn't so good. And then you look back in your life and you go, oh my God. I always remember back, it's not so bad now, but I remember when I was a kid working in the catering and the hospitality industry in Ireland, you get a lot of American tourists, and it was almost unknown to meet an American tourist under 55. Almost unknown. They were all 50. We used to call them the Blue Rinse Brigade. All these elderly women with blue hair. They had blue rinsed hair. And when you'd ask them, why are you only traveling now and visiting foreign countries? They would say, we were working all our lives. It was too much. We were just working to pay bills. And, where Irish people generally travel a lot. Irish people are big into travel. We've one of the high, if not the highest percentage of any Western nation living overseas. That's not because we're all running away from hell. That's because we are, by our nature, a nation of wanderers. That's probably how we got to this island in the first place. We probably wandered from, Iberia. That's just what we are. We're wanderers. If you look at our creation mythology, it's all waves of invaders. They call them invaders, but they're really the new blood. But the old one doesn't die out. The journey never stops at the western shore. So that's we have that. But still, you'd say, but English people travel a lot away. And British, when they're younger, you just say to yourself, where have you been? I've never been anywhere. And they would say things like, well, the United States is so big, you don't have to go abroad. Valid point. That's actually very true. But at the same time, too, you don't just travel abroad to expand your visual awareness of scenery. You do it as a cultural experience. And that's one of the problems with the Americans, is they were never very worldly, because they thought, well, why should I go to Spain or Portugal when I can go to Arizona and California? Why should I go to Ireland when I can go to Maine or Wisconsin? But it's not about the actual physical location and what the scenery looks like. It's the cultural exploration that makes you a more fuller pair. That's why I always tell people, what's the best thing I can do in my life, a young person? Emigrate. Emigrate. Go anywhere. Anywhere. Just go live in another country for a while and absorb the culture, because it would switches off all the neural pathways in your brain that have put you in a state of compliance and complacency. So go away, move away, expose yourself to danger, live, explore, absorb, and you're a better person. And you're more likely then in that situation to escape either the meat golem or the Cthulhu fodder. You're much more likely to understand that the world is a far more complex and dynamic place than what the newspaper editorial and the evening news tells you. It's very, very different. And as a result, you tend to come back or stay away thinking very differently, living very differently. That's a good thing. Now, this idea of the meat golem, I want to extrapolate on further. Now, the term golem comes from, it's an old Hebrew idea of the word basically translates to a grunt, or a heavy, or should we say, a lifter, a performer of menial tasks. It comes from that originally. Someone who is just good for lifting weights, doing menial work, and so on. A grunt, as they call them in America. General Dog's Body, as they call them in England. Now, that idea then evolved into something quite different, where the Kabbalists and the early Hebrew mystics would take a creature that they would make themselves, generally from clay, in a similar idea of God creating Adam from clay. And they would make this thing called a golem. And then they would put a life force into it that made the golem basically be a servant to help the rabbi or the mystic or the Kabbalist lift tables, carry things, and so on. Now, we have the famous story of the Rabbi Lodz in the Prague ghetto, who created the Golem of Prague in order to protect the Jewish ghetto at the time. But the thing went on a rampage, and the Emperor Rudolf II of Bohemia asked Rabbi Lodz to take the power away from the Golem. And so that's the famous story of that. But it goes a lot deeper than that. And let's talk about the expression in the Jewish expression, particularly in the Yiddish expression of the Goyim. Goyim is different than a Gentile. A Gentile is simply someone who isn't Jewish. A Goyim is someone who isn't Jewish that doesn't have a soul. They're a functioning automaton. Now, before you all get all wired up and you're the fucking Jews, and all this stuff, let me finish. Let me listen to me, okay? They're telling the truth from their perspective. Orthodox Jews and Kabbalists believe that the God who created the world is a monster. It's almost like he's Cthulhu. I'm kidding you. This is like really intense stuff. And they're trying to keep this monster, Yahweh, at bay. And they're doing it to protect the human race, Jews and Gentiles, both. And the greatest impediment to them protecting the planet and the world from this monster God, this demon God, Yahweh, are the Goyim, the soulless Gentiles who attack Jewish communities in Russia and elsewhere during pogroms and killed Kabbalists, burned important Kabbalistic texts, and so on. We can take this to the next level. Maybe you and I and others are beasts born without a soul. And we have to maybe develop it somehow. Or we have a kind of a seed soul or a proto-soul. And it's only through the decisions we make in our life, how we create, who we put ourselves involved with, that we develop this soul. So you would have a situation where the meat golems would be like the goyim, the beasts without a soul, and they've done nothing. See, I'm terrified of them. Even though I don't hate them, I'm terrified of them. These are the ones who cause genocide because they just do as they're told. These are the ones who mass murder, where the other ones, the Cthulhu fodder, they would be the ones who would rescue Jews from the Holocaust, would be the ones to say, so you can't burn this woman, she's not a witch, you've no proof. This kind of that, the kinds of ones who would stand up against injustice, but they'd probably be killed as well. Where the rest of us would say, this is fucked up, I'm out of here. That's what we're like. Maybe we are the ones, maybe the Cthulhu fodder, they're the ones who have developed a better soul than the proto soul of the meat golems, and they're managing a more authentic life in terms of human decency, but it's all going wrong for them because they have still put their faith in the meat golem system. And then there's us, the artists, the bohemians, the neurotics, the ones who have to deal with this shit. Maybe people who suffer from depression, I don't know. And we're actually in the stages of making ourselves a proper soul. But what's happening is, because we don't have the training of, say, the Kabbalists, that we don't have a structure, so it's a difficult growing process for us. It's painful. We make mistakes, things go wrong. And maybe we need some kind of structure like that to help us develop that without, see, all growth comes through pain. If you grow up, when you come out of your mother's body, it's a painful experience. When you're growing up, you get growing pains. When girls get their periods, boys, puberty causes their voices to change and things like that. When you enter into a long-term relationship, you go through pain because you're trying to adapt to that other person and they're trying to adapt to you. When you when you get a soul to, say, an adequate level, that's when all the pain and suffering comes in, and the neuroses and the torment, because you don't have the structure to deal with that. And this is what Kabbalism is really about. Kabbalism is the slow ascension to a kind of a completed soul, at least one that works on this planet, through a system of development, which most of you know is the Kabbalistic tree of life. But we can all do it probably in other ways, but they have developed an actual system. As Crowley says, you have to go through the process, because the direct path from the bottom to the top is black magic. I agree with this. And so maybe we all began as meat golems at some stage, went through a stage of being Cthulhu fodder, and then here we are now, what I'd call the woken up people, or whatever you want to call it. I hate that fucking term, but I mean, the ones who are, shall we say, not managing better, but accommodating it better, should I say? Interesting idea. Interesting idea when you look on it that way. It's also a very humbling idea. Now you look at the New Agers, a lot of them talk about how beautiful their souls are, and how colourful and magical their souls are, and there's some of those horrible people you ever meet. I've met some lovely New Agers as well. I'm not going to say they're all like that. They make mistakes just like anyone else in life. I've met some lovely ones too, but a lot of them are just mad. They're nasty. They're very passive-aggressive and very, very wicked and hurtful, filled with insecurities. That's because they've entered the black magic stage that Crowley's talking about. They have not. They've tried to climb the tree of life and fell off. They didn't go through the processes on the way. Now, I'm not saying we should all become Kabbalists. Certainly, it's almost impossible to get decent information unless you're an Orthodox Jew on the Kabbalah. It's what you see as out there as being Kabbalist workshops and all these books on the Kabbalah. They're all bollocks. They're not the real thing. The real Kabbalah is what the Orthodox rabbis are involved in. That's the real one. And unless you read Hebrew or Yiddish, it's going to be very difficult to find out what that is. And I don't blame them not wanting to share it. So that's why they are the way they are. They maybe it's not maybe it's not true, maybe it is true, I don't know. But if you understand that these Kabbalists are like scientists that are doing a form of magical science to keep this demon god at bay, to keep Cthulhu under the ocean. And then if the Goyams come along and cause chaos, well, then they'd lose control and Cthulhu rises. It could be a change in consciousness, a change in a shift. It doesn't necessarily mean a demon is coming down from the sky, but a degradation of humanity occurs. A much different idea than a lot of the other Abrahamic religions, where you wait for salvation. Salvation is in the hands of the adepts. This is also where Freemasonry came along. If you look at the early history of Freemasonry, it was people like William Stuckley. Now, William Stuckley was a remarkable man. He was the first real ardent promoter of Freemasonry. He was an Anglican clergyman in England in the 1600s to the 1700s, and he was one of the guiding founding fathers of Freemasonry. And he was the first one to go and do the first decent surveys without being afraid of them in places like Avebury and Stonehenge. And Stuckley was convinced that they were built around 640 AD as temples of the Druids who were creating a kind of a new soul of Christianity. Now, his dates were wildly off by thousands of years, but there's a real good reason for this. The astronomer Edmund Halley was working with him, and they were looking for alignments in Stonehenge with cosmic and celestial objects, and they found a specific alignment based on a study of magnetism of the stones of Stonehenge to the North Star. And Halley, being a wizard mathematician, this is one of the things that so was Stuckley. Stuckley wrote one of the first ever biographies of Isaac Newton. So Stuckley was no run-of-the-mill clergyman. But what they'd done was they had determined this fixed position between one of the stones at Stonehenge and the North Star, and then just calculated the date of the construction of Stonehenge based on backdating that, and they came to 640 AD, which we know is thousands of years off. The reason why they made that big mistake, was at the time they didn't know that the magnetic north and the pole star are in two different positions. The general assumption was that magnetic north was approximately on top of the North Pole. We now know that it's off by several degrees, and not only that, magnetic north wobbles, it changes, it moves all the time. And this led to this miscalculation of the date of Stonehenge by backdating it. This is really interesting stuff. But Stuckley was trying to do almost the same thing. He was almost like one of the first. Remember, he came out of the period that just come after the Puritans, where you had the horrific witch burnings, particularly in Germany, and you had like the puritanical government in England, and a lot of this kind of thing. And he'd almost figured out that Christianity wasn't right for the English people. It was turning them into, into golems in the service of Cromwell and the Puritans. And he embarked through Freemasonry and through his own sort of mystical version of Anglican Christianity into this idea that the Druids were building a soul for the future people, and that soul became a decent version of Christianity. Stuckley, it was actually become one of my heroes in recent years, was also the one who created the idea of mysticism surrounding places like Avebury and Stonehenge, which I'm not going to deny, but he came with the idea of the ritual landscape. Now, I know the ritual landscapes, but the reason why when you walk around the henge at Avebury, along the avenue of stones, and then over Windmill Hill at the bottom, and then view Silbury Hill as it comes over the crest, and then walk up towards West Kennet Longbarrow, you have a very mystical experience for the simple reason that the mysticism has been charged into the landscape by people who were inspired by Stuckley's writings. That's why a lot of the Irish megalithic sites, they're simply dead. No one cares about them. Carrowkeel is one because it's difficult to get to. That still has the energy. Creevy Keel Court Tomb, that has the energy in Sligo, and a few others, Loch Crew as well. The majority of them don't have it because there's no love put into them. That's what my whole bringing back the snakes idea is about. Putting the love back into these places. And Stuckley did that. We owe him an enormous debt. And a lot of that came from his interest and his pioneering work in Freemasonry. So all of you go, Freemasonry is evil and all this crap. You just don't know what you're talking about. Maybe the Freemasonry of today, where they fix jobs for the boys and the local copper's a Freemason and he gets some guy off a charge when this kind of thing is lodge brother. That's one thing, but that's not how it started out really. It was a quest for mystical knowledge in the collapse of Cromwell's Puritan England. And that's what gives me the most happiness in my life. Like today, I just, through an investigation, I discovered that there was a stone circle in a bay near here called Tanrigo Bay. And how I found out about it was I discovered that there was in 1779 there was this Dutch artist called Gabriel Berenger, and he toured Connacht in 1870ish, and 1879 he made a tour of Connacht in 1779, and the books and the pictures were published in 1870s, and he went to Carramore Passage Tomb. And he went to the Queen Maeve's cairn at the top of Knocknarea, and he made these beautiful watercolor sketches. And going through his books and his things, I discovered that this bay called Tanrigo, which is in a very beautiful place at the bottom of the hills of Screen at the Ox Mountains and across from Queen Maeve's tomb, that he said that there was some court tombs there. They're all over here, nothing special. But he also said that there was something known locally in Tanrigo Bay called Cuchulain's Tomb. Now, the monument apparently was destroyed in 1858, and his drawings showed a row of stones with a Carramore type thing. But the thing about this is, it's off the water. And I've been looking for this, and I found it today. It's just off the bay, and I'll be giving a report on this soon. But the stone circle, not only is the stone circle there, but also the problem is it's a very tidal estuary. It's a salt marsh, and it's also the sand is like quicksand. If you had the right boots, you could probably wade out to this thing, but you probably wouldn't get back. The way to do it is to get into a dinghy or to swim. I intend to swim a little bit, or at least get into the water. It's not that far off, because today it was a good bit off because the tide was well in. But on other days, it's almost on the shoreline, and I want to get out. I want to get out at some point, but the circle is there. And as I said, I've also probably discovered a line of an avenue of stones leading directly to it. the monuments people in Ireland ignored it because they couldn't determine what it was. Now, if Berenger's artwork and reports are correctly identifying, other court cairns, middens, cromlechs, and so on in the area very, very accurately, I have no reason to believe that he was lying about this so-called Cuchulain's tomb in Tanrigo Bay. So I asked some of the locals, and it's a classic Irish landscape. It's like mountains, thatch roof cottages, and a beautiful beach and shorelines. It's hardcore Ireland. So I knocked on a few doors, and talking to a couple of people, none of them knew about it or knew where it was. They didn't know there was a Cuchulain's tomb there, and the knowledge has been lost. So I've rediscovered it. And not only have I rediscovered it, but the energy that I felt going there today, I felt like I was being welcomed back home. Maybe I'm the first person since Gabriel Berenger in 1779 to actually have appreciated what I was seeing, and it made me feel that way. And the landscape was alive and beautiful. And more importantly, the reason why this Cuchulain's tomb, this ring of stones, is now under the water, will be the topic of the main thrust, well, one of the main thrusts of my upcoming book. That my own exploration of the Sligo coastline has made me in no doubt that a massive tsunami happened in the past. Not only do we have large amounts of shells deposited high up on the hills, but also boulders that are definitely from the sea. And I believe that I'm going to flesh out the idea, but this was the so-called tsunami of Atlantis that Plato described and became kind of fluffed up and gentrified later on. But it was really just a case of people living on coastal regions of Ireland, Scotland, Celtiberia, and France who were just wiped out. I also believe that this is the reason why the Grand Menhir of Loch Macquarie in Brittany, the 80-foot high standing stone, was knocked over. It was knocked over by the sea. So that's all exciting stuff coming up. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. ThomasSheridanArts.com. As ever, thank you for listening in such large numbers. Thank you for giving me an interesting life, and I appreciate all the emails you send me and all the letters and messages you send me. And always, even though I don't reply to them all, or I try to, but it takes time, I greatly appreciate them, and thank you for being part of this discussion and this journey. Good night, look after yourself, and feck 'em if they can't take a joke.